My name is Charlotte Dixon and I am an employment advisor for BMA Cymru Wales. I'm here to give you an understanding of the main differences between the contract in England, initially brought in 2016, and the previous contract that continues to be in place in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, which has been in place since 2002. Shortly you will be applying to foundation school and you may want to know about the different contracts in anticipation to your application. Usually, myself and my colleagues would visit your medical school to deliver this presentation in person, but due to COVID, we are unable to. But we wanted to provide you with the information in this presentation at the start of your final year as a medical student. This is a summarised version of a preparing for work talk that we will deliver after your elective sometime next year. I will show you some of the details of your contract and explain how the BMA can support you as you join the medical workforce. I'll aim to cover as much information as possible throughout this talk, but if you do have any questions, either visit the BMA website or email our team of advisors who will be happy to help you. The BMA is the Doctors' Trade Union and Professional Association. We are the voice of the medical professional, representing all doctors and medical students, locally and nationally, on the issues that affect you and supporting you throughout your careers. We are here if you experience any difficulties at work, need individual career support, or want to build on your professional development. We are not an indemnity insurer and we do not deal with patient complaints, so we recommend that you seek this cover in addition. You may be aware that there are two terms and conditions of service for junior doctors in the UK. The terms and conditions of service, or TCS, that apply in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland were introduced in 2002 and is referred to as the New Deal. The terms and conditions in England has now been universally accepted after further revisions after a review in 2018. I will outline these additions later in this presentation. Firstly, we'll look at salary. These are the different rates for an F1 doctor under the 2002 terms on the left and the English contract on the right. Under the 2002 contract, you usually start at the minimum point of the pay scale and progress through the pay structure with every year's service. The pay scale under the English contract is comprised of 4 nodal points linked to the stage of training the junior doctor is working at. You may also be entitled to London waiting if your hospital is within a specified area. There are 2 zones, a London zone and a fringe zone, and different rates apply to each. Each year, salary scales are reviewed by the Doctors and Dentists Review Body, which decides whether to increase the salary points with a cost of living rise. These salaries are based on you working a 40-hour working week. However, in reality, junior doctors' average weekly working hours are greater than this due to the out-of-hours commitment, namely working evenings, nights and weekends. The average weekly working hours should not be greater than 48 hours due to the provisions of the working time regulations, which prohibits working in excess of 48 hours per week on average unless that individual has opted out of the regulations by signing an opt-out form. If you are planning on working less than full-time, under the 2016 contract, pay is pro rata. Under the 2002 terms, your salary will be dependent on the total number of hours a full-timer works and the proportion of the less than full-time trainee works. Only your basic pay is pensionable. This graph gives a visual representation of the comparison between the two pay structures. As you can see, the English pay is front-loaded compared to the 2002 terms. Thanks to the contract changes agreed last year, in October 2020, a 5th nodal point will be introduced for trainees on the English contract starting at ST6 and above, which will increase the salary to £52,036. Any additional hours worked over the basic hours of 40 per week are also paid differently under the two contracts. In England, you are remunerated at the basic rate of 1/40th of your weekly whole-time equivalent salary for each hour over the 40 hours up to a maximum of 8 additional hours. Under the 2002 terms, any additional hours over the 40 hours per week is reflected in a banding supplement, which I will detail later in the presentation. F1s usually work what are known as full shift rotas, which is a combination of normal working days, late or long shifts of between 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and nights, and requires for you to be on site and working throughout this shift. Under the 2002 terms, any nighttime work between the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. is classed as premium time and paid as part of the banding supplement. In England, you will be paid for the average hours of work undertaken whilst out of hours at the agreed rates of pay. The hours paid will be calculated prospectively across the rota cycle, and the estimated average hours at each rate of pay will be set out in your work schedule. For the purposes of pay, these total estimates shall be converted into equal weekly amounts by dividing the total number of prospective hours at each rate by the number of weeks in the rota cycle. The weekly amount will then be turned into an annual figure, and you will be paid 1/12 of the annual figure for each complete month. An enhancement of 37% of the hourly basic pay rate shall be paid on any hours worked between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. on any day of the week. Again, any work completed at the weekend under the 2002 terms will be classed as premium time and paid via the banding supplement. The English contract provides for an allowance to be paid if you are to be rostered to work on a weekend. The amount of this allowance is a percentage based on the frequency of weekends across the length of the rota cycle. As you progress with your training, you may be asked to work a non-resident on-call or NROC shift. This is unlikely to apply to you as foundation doctors. Non-resident on-call is not a full shift and is where your employer requires you to be available to return to work or to give advice by phone, but you are not expected to be working on-site for the whole period. In Wales, if you are given an NROC shift, this will be accounted for in your banding. In England, you will be paid an on-call availability allowance. The banding system aims to remunerate junior doctors on the 2002 terms fairly, according to the actual hours worked and the frequency of their out-of-hours work. Every full-time junior doctor on the 2002 terms and conditions will be working on a rota that falls into one of these pay bands or will be unbanded. You will be notified of your banding once you start employment, and this can change throughout your training as you move between rotations. Under the 2016 contract, there are also annual pay supplements of varying amounts that are awarded to certain types of trainee. These are known as flexible pay premia. These are made for various reasons, for example, to address current recruitment shortages in a particular specialty by making the specialty more financially attractive, or to address a pay disparity between one specialty and others. So you can see the total salary you will be paid is going to be dependent on your working pattern. In Wales, if the rota fulfills the criteria of a specific banding, then it is straightforward to calculate your total salary. In England, there are several different elements to take into consideration. You will be issued with your own work schedule, and the BMA has a rota checker on our website that will assist in determining the additional payments that your specific rota will attract. Please be aware this rota checker is only for the 2016 English contract. This is an example of a rota in Wales. It includes on-call duties, which F1s do not do, but does give an idea of what a rota would look like. It's based on a 5-week cycle, which means there are only 5 doctors on the rota, which would usually be a fairly intense rota. There is a high frequency of out-of-hours work, and so this rota is likely to be a band 1A or 2A if the rota have opted out of the working time regulations. As you can see, determining salary may not be straightforward, and your total pay is going to fluctuate from rota to rota. Within your F1 year, you will have 3 placements or rotations, and your salary is likely to be different for each one. Under the 2002 terms, all you need to ask to determine the total salary is what banding does the rota attract. Under the 2016 terms, you may need to ask the following, which you can only do once you have sight of the rota. If you are working under the 2016 contract, once you are issued with your own work schedule, the BMA has a rota checker on our website that will assist in determining the additional payments that your specific rota will attract. There are 2 instruments that govern your hours of work: your contract, either the 2002 Terms and Conditions or the 2016 English contract, and the working time regulations. As they both apply simultaneously, there is sometimes an overlap between the 2, but whatever is most beneficial to you will apply. The 2002 contract provides for a break of 30 minutes after 4 hours of working. The 2016 contract provides for at least one 30-minute break for a shift lasting more than 5 hours, and a second 30-minute break if the shift is more than 9 hours. Breaks should be free from interruptions and count towards working time. If you believe that you are working excess hours to that of the working time regulations or your rota, under the 2002 terms, you are able to request a monitoring exercise to assess your hours and the taking of breaks. Monitoring should also take place every 6 months. The results will be looked at over the entire rota and not on an individual basis, and you are able to appeal if you do not agree with the results of the review. Under the 2016 contract, as your work pattern is individual, you make the Health Board or Trust aware under an exception reporting system. There is also an appointed guardian of safe working. If excessive hours and lack of breaks are identified during a monitoring exercise under the 2002 terms, the contract provides for a payment of 100% of your basic salary. Under the English contract, the Guardian for Safe Working can levy a fine if the hours breach safe working limits, and the money is split between the juniors directly and the trust to be put towards benefits for the juniors. As an F1 under the 2002 contract, you are entitled to 5 weeks annual leave. You are also entitled to bank holidays and an additional 2 days known as statutory days. These may either be specified by the employer or converted into annual leave. You may find that leave is fixed into your rota and you may have to swap leave with your colleagues. Under the 2016 terms, leave is outlined in days and you are entitled to 27 days as an F1. Fixed leave is not used under the 2016 terms unless expressly agreed. Leave in the 2016 contract is also granted for life events such as weddings. Under the 2002 terms, juniors are able to pick up locum shifts up to 48 hours a week or 56 hours a week if you have opted out of the limit under the working time regulations. Under the 2016 terms, juniors must first offer any spare hours to the NHS via their staff bank. As a result of the 2018 review into the 2016 contract and subsequent referendum, several enhancements have been agreed with the BMA and NHS Employers England. Some of these are already in place and others will roll out over the next few years. These include increases to the percentages for weekend work, a fifth nodal point to recognise senior trainees, and agree in for 46 hours rest after a night shift. The Welsh Junior Doctor Committee have begun discussions with the Welsh Government and NHS employers with regards to reviewing the contract in Wales, but this has been paused due to COVID. The particular contract in place in the location in which you are a trainee may not be your only deciding factor, and there may be other considerations you wish to take into account when determining where you wish to train. You may need to consider the following. All the contractual documentation, including specific resources, are available on the BMA website for members. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, either visit the BMA website or email our team of advisors who will be happy to help you. Diolch.